Good morning. So, yeah, I'm just dressed for fun in the sun. Okay, verse 21 of Mark 9, or Mark 5. It's almost a 9 if you just connect that little section on the side here. Verse 21. Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and he begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, Who touched me? And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Yeah, I'm just going to stop there. We can break this up into two. We saw the beginning of obviously Jairus and his daughter of 12 years old. And now we're moving on to a woman who was commonly known as Veronica. That's tradition after the Bible's times. But sometimes when there's a tradition like her name was Veronica, well, let's just go with it. There's no real reason not to, I guess. And that she was actually from Caesarea Philippi, and that they actually had a statue there that was made by her, and that she was from a wealthy family, or at least herself was wealthy, and that she spent all that she had. And that was part of the idea, was that it was a wealthy woman who had actually been basically taken down from riches to rags because of spending all this money trying to cure this disease, this problem. And it's worth noting that quite often we will suffer. You could probably play on this and go different directions with Jairus' 12-year-old daughter and Veronica's 12-year-long struggle. Here's a daughter who's growing up healthy, who has obviously a severe condition come upon her to where she dies and then is healed, brought back. Where another woman has a condition that gradually gets worse and worse and worse over the duration of 12 years. And again, I mean, like I said, we can read into this, and there's probably some other cool symbology, but with Veronica, I'm just going to keep calling her that because, again, it just works. You can call her Rachel or Shaniqua or whatever you want to call her, but she is trying with her own resources to cure something that seems to be incurable. Obviously, she just didn't hand her money out to anyone, but there were people who proposed that they could help her. They could help her with this ongoing struggle that doesn't seem to be getting any better. It seems to be getting worse. And sometimes with us, we might be struggling with something, and you would think, being a Christian at least, it should be getting better, when in fact it's actually getting worse. And maybe it's not a physical issue so much as it is an emotional issue, an addiction issue, a temperament issue, something about us we would hope would be getting better in time, but it's not getting better. It's in fact getting worse. Until finally, it's like she gives up and she has nothing left to lose, because with this issue of blood and the Jewish culture and the Mosaic law, she couldn't touch anyone without defiling them. And so you have to understand, part of this is her hesitancy, why she seems so fearful of confessing it was her who touched Jesus. Well, it's because she just defiled a rabbi. And that's kind of a big deal. And so that's the thing, is like, this wasn't just a simple thing. This was quite a daring thing that she did. But she was at that point of, what else does she have to lose? Now, it's worth noting that Jairus calls Jesus to come to his daughter. We should be familiar with the story of the centurion who tells Jesus, you don't even need to come. Just say the word and I know it'll happen. And Jesus speaks of that great faith. Jairus does want him to come. This woman, Jesus doesn't even need to know what she's doing. She thinks Jesus could even be fully unaware of what I desire. But if I can just touch him, in fact, if I can just touch his garment, right? If I can touch those tallit, little tassels that hang down, just touch that. He doesn't even have to know I did it. And I'll be healed. And likely she did it in such a way that he didn't know. I mean, that's kind of the idea. I think the fact that he felt power and turns around, obviously, she did it in such a way that it wasn't noticeable to anyone else, and probably wouldn't have been noticeable by Jesus other than by supernatural revelation, right? But we see her faith involved in this. That all she needs is to touch Jesus and she'll be healed. And, there is something tied with our faith, or it's not our faith that's limited. It's the appropriation of God's promises being limited by our faith. There's something here accessible to us, but how do we make this accessible thing a reality? That's appropriating it. You're taking it, you're actually using it. You're taking it, you're applying it. All these promises of God's word. Well, it's by faith. And I think we can see different faith levels or manifestations here. If Jesus would come, then my daughter would be healed. If I can touch his garment, then I will be healed. Jesus just has to say the word, and I know my servant will be healed. They're all looking for healing. But it's interesting on how they all have a different view of what needs to happen so that they'd be healed. And quite often, I think we all can be guilty of setting a bar higher than it needs to be. If only I could this, then God will heal me. If I could get my ducks in a row, then God would bless my this or that. But most of our promises are just based off faith alone, right? Just believing that God can and will and does. And so here, she believes that she needs to touch his garment. So she comes and she does it. And Jesus feels it. And she's afraid because, again, she knows that she defiled a rabbi. But he looks at her and says, daughter. You see, she had been cast out from her people for 12 years. She couldn't join in on any of the celebrations, any of the religious festivities. And it's not Jesus' daughter, per se. I mean, it's daughter of Abraham. It was a common phrase, a son or a daughter of Abraham. We read about that other place in the gospel. And so just daughter is that idea. You're a daughter of Abraham. And now she is again. In that sense that she can now participate. She can now be an active member of the Jewish community because of what was just done. And so, daughter, your faith has made you well. It was her faith that if she could only touch the hem of his garment. Well, again, do you need to touch the hem of Jesus' garment? Because you're going to be looking for a long time, because I don't know if his garments are around anymore. If only I could then. You know, sometimes things like baptism, communion, and other things, though they have no miraculous power in and of themselves, can become miraculous when sometimes it's the person who just thinks, if only I got baptized then. And I try to remind people, it's like, well, the baptisms, doesn't have any magic powers, but sometimes it's a place where we can have a release of faith. I think it's how Pastor Chuck used to put it. A point of release for our faith. Similar to the pool of Bethesda, when the waters stirred, people went down in faith, believing that the angel had touched it and it would make them well. And so I often encourage people when they go to Israel to get baptized again, assuming you've never been baptized before. And that's because even if it's not, I've already been baptized. Oh, yeah, but you know what? It's a great opportunity to maybe put your faith in believing that maybe this special moment or occasion can be a turning point in your life. But do you need it? No. And Israel baptism doesn't do anything different than, the baptismal at church, the local pool, the local pond, or a feeding trough in the back of a truck. Done that before. So it's the idea is that, but we have a place where we can release our faith. And so here we go. She is now healed. Daughter, go. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Be healed of your affliction. And he sends her off. So tradition, again, is that she does actually regain her wealth. And that's why she actually becomes a large contributor to the early church there in Caesarea Philippi. And I believe, that there was a statue made of her. That's what the statue was, a statue of her, and this named Veronica, in Philippi because of her faith and then her contributions to the early church. If you've been to Israel, you probably remember Caesarea Philippi, Banyas, with the, we see the pagan temple, and that's mostly what's left there as far as the remains are, but that's where she was from. So, your faith, a point of release for your faith. What are you waiting for? Oh, God will heal me if. God will heal me when. Or just knowing that it's just by faith that God's promises are appropriated. You don't need to put a limit on what God can do and when God can do it. He can do it anytime, any place. Maybe a good one for you is, God can heal me if I make it to the end of the live stream. And if you can do that, then you can be healed. Bye.